Joining me now is Chris Martenson with Peak Prosperity. He, by the way, is going to be a keynote speaker at our 22nd annual national conference taking place this October 3rd and 4th, 30 minutes outside of Memphis, Tennessee in the Mid-South. You can get full details at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. He joins us now. Chris, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
It's a real pleasure to be back with you, all your followers and listeners here.
Thank you, Chris.
Quite a time. Quite a time to be alive.
Well, let's talk about where we're going as a nation. World War III, China, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Israel. It's all heating up. BRICS banking system. What is one to think from an economic standpoint when all this is going on? What is coming economically? I know you're watching the trends and you have some ideas, and you're kind of known for many things, but Peak Prosperity Economics is one of the things. That's how I know you from Jim Pavlos. Is that his name, Jim Pavlov? From
Puplava.
What? Puplava?
Puplava.
That's how I'd known you for 20 plus years, about 20 years, probably close to 20 years from that. So I know economics is a big area you cover. What's the average American, the average investor? And of course, we have people watching us all over the world. What do they think about these economic times?
Well, the vibe, whether we're talking to high-level sophisticated financiers or retirees who used to work for the grid in Ohio, a lot of people are nervous. Mm-hmm. They sense that something is not quite right. I've heard these markets described lately as kayfabe, right? It's a fake wrestling match, right? So let's take today, for example. Here we are. We're talking on Monday, June 16th. All this weekend, we saw hypersonic missile launches from Iran back into Tel Aviv, Haifa. We saw Israel attacking even energy assets in Iran. So obviously, this should create some uncertainty. So oil opens up last night, $2 or $3, immediately gets sold all day. I wake up this morning, it's down $3. This is not a real market anymore. There are people who control the markets now, I believe, is just as much as MSNBC controls the narrative on their channel. It's too, I hope this isn't too shocking. There are people out there who don't want actual price discovery because they think it's going to send the wrong message. They've done this with gold and silver for years and years. And I think they're doing it with other markets now, too. That's the world we live in. And unfortunately, I have about as much faith in markets like that, Brennan, as I do Soviet crop reports. Markets need to be free. They need to send out price signals. Buyers and sellers should set that price, not what they're called non-economic players, central banks setting prices because, they just wouldn't want the wrong idea going out that maybe people are nervous right now. But that's what the markets should be telegraphing, not supreme calm. And that's where we're at. And so a lot of people are nervous about that. And I think rightly so.
Do you think gold's going to keep going higher or not?
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely. Look, gold is sending out a signal that they've worked very hard to contain for many decades. And now they're keeping it as much in check as they possibly can. But every single piece of data I'm getting says the West continues to sort of sell gold. The East, mainly China, continues to buy gold, and a lot. So it's all ending up in China. We know there's going to be a new kid on the block at some point in time. We know there's going to be a new competitor to the dollar. We know that China's going to have a hand in that. And obviously, whoever backs that currency with something tangible is going to, I think, have a viable competitor to the dollar. That's the great game that's unfolding right now. And gosh, I wish I could tell you it was going well, but it's starting to look it's looking a little random on both the domestic and the international fronts right now.
Yeah, indeed it is. Indeed it is. So, Chris, let's talk about the Middle East and all that's happening there. Do you see this impacting BRICS at all, the BRICS banking system?
Well, absolutely. So not just that, but look at what just happened. Let me rewind a tiny bit. I don't know. It's probably 8-9 years ago. Putin came out to the world and said, look, whether presidents in the United States come or go, there's sort of this permanent bureaucracy. He just repeated this about 2 years ago. And he said, look, we don't think the West and the United States particularly is what he called agreement capable. That means you make an agreement and you keep it. And so we saw that even Angela Merkel of Germany, former leader, came out and said, yeah, we put these Minsk agreements in place, but we didn't have any intention of abiding by these agreements. They were just to give Ukraine time to rearm and get ready for war with Russia. So Russia doesn't consider us agreement capable, and China increasingly doesn't see us as agreement capable, and that's a problem. And so now let's fast forward. Trump was talking and in direct talks with Iran. Iran had signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the nuclear NPT. They'd also allowed International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA inspectors into their country. They had full access to look at all their nuclear programs. Everybody was in agreement that they weren't working on a nuclear bomb. We had Tulsi Gabbard say, hey, all 18 of our intelligence agencies, same thing. They're not really working on anything. Trump says, let's continue the negotiations. They think they're going into a negotiation later that weekend. And then on that Friday night, Israel bombs them. Trump first said, I didn't know about that. Then I guess that didn't sit right. So what did we hear yesterday? He said, oh, yeah, I knew all about that. I knew the timing. So that tells the whole world that Trump can't be negotiated with. I mean, you might negotiate, but he might just decide to tell you he's negotiating, but secretly know that you're about to get bombed instead. These sorts of things, Brennan, are exceedingly disruptive to international relations.
Is Donald Trump's star fading a little bit here? And is he really is he really a moderate negotiator if he cut a 10-year mineral rights deal with Ukraine, which really means a security package in part, I guess. And then he's also, sitting there cutting deals in the Middle East with one Arab nation after another, I guess, coming back from the Middle East with like $1 trillion. Well, how does that, isn't he again biased to what's going on in the Middle East? Is in other words, he being controlled by the almighty dollar through this? Saying things like, don't take out Khomeini, don't let him die, do that to him. And I think Israel's saying, we're going to do what we got to do. And the people of Iran, they want freedom. They want freedom. They want this regime gone. They want him gone. So, I mean, how can Trump be a neutral negotiator in any of these crises when he's already sided with the Arab world and taken a bunch of their money, and he is sided with Ukraine by taking a 10-year mineral rights deal?
I think you have to trust that people in that position are going to be taking a very long-term view. Look, the Middle East has never been a place of great quiet. It has a long and storied tradition of not just two major sects of Islam, Shia and Sunni, warring, but subsects within that. We've got different sort of tribal elements. We've got a very volatile mix over there. And by the way, it was under Jimmy Carter that this whole doctrine came out, which said, we're going to be the world's policeman, but we got to make sure that oil continues to flow from that region. Now, this is the grand prize. This is where out of that Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, and Iran controls that, obviously. It's their shoreline. That's where around 25% of the daily oil that flows across the world flows. 25% of what we consume. But it's about 40% of all the oil that's exported, right? So a lot of countries produce and consume their own oil. What does the world really care about? It's exportable oil, and there's a whole big chunk of it comes through that little tiny choke point. So this is what's at risk here right now. If Iran did decide, hey, our egos are too bruised, this is existential, they're really holding a very serious card in this game. And if they play that card, Brennan, if they say, we're shutting down the strait, and they manage to accomplish that for 30 to 60 days. I don't know how the Western economies survive that, given how much debt we have, given how fragile they are, given where the consumers are in this story, given where everybody's just sort of on edge, but also levered up with just tons of debt, not to mention our own government going into deficits and further debt. So this is a very volatile situation right now. And I think we would need to have the calmest negotiators who have a long-term interest of our country at heart. And that's where you said, is Trump being tarnished a little? I think so, because he campaigned on no more wars in America first. And this is getting both those things are in question right now.
Okay, so where do you see gold going by the end of the year, if you had to guess?
Probably closing in on 4,000, probably my guess. I think if it was allowed to just run freely, if it wasn't being sort of managed higher slowly over time by whoever does that, I think its native price would be 5 to 10,000 right now, because we're looking at something that I think you and I have talked about before, which is that the dollar as a reserve currency is under question. And so what's a reserve currency? It means the United States exports a lot. We export a lot of dollars. It's what we do. Our trade deficit alone this year is going to be between 800 and 900 billion dollars. That means that there's 800 to 900 billion US dollars that are overseas somewhere. And we want people to hold on to them, not send them right back. Because if they send them right back, we experience that as they don't want dollars. So they buy other things with those dollars, which means the dollar appears to be falling in price. And as it does that, we experience that as more inflation, rising prices for all things imported. We're seeing a little of that with the tariffs, right? Because, you'd say, okay, Walmart has to spend 20, 30% more on something as a fee to the government to import something from China. They'll eat some of that. They'll pass some of that along. Just it's how business works. But with the dollar potentially losing its reserve currency status, and not losing it going to zero, but I mean, every time it ticks down a single percent, it's 70% of foreign reserves, 67, all that just starts ticking down. As that happens, we find that it gets harder and harder to fund our deficits, the interest payments on the outstanding debt, and it just gets harder and harder to conduct business. And gold, I think, stands a very strong chance of being part of the monetary future, not as like a thing you wear on a wedding band, or you and I might buy a coin to store, but I mean as part of the international monetary structure. And that's happening even as we speak.
Let's talk about you're going to the No Kings rallies this weekend. You along with a few others told me, or broadcast on your platforms, it looked like a geriatric convention.
And not a healthy one either, if there is such a thing. No, I mean, there were people in walkers, there were masks, there was a lot of, they were just, but I would have to say the median age, like half people older, half younger, was probably around 65, maybe 68.
What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
Well, I've heard some theories about this. Here's a good one. I just ran across this on Twitter earlier today by a guy named Victoria who said, hey, you know why boomers seem to be so susceptible to Trump derangement syndrome, Elon derangement syndrome, whatever the next thing derangement syndrome is that they get all excited about, no kings, right? Is because they grew up at a time, a lot of them, Walter Cronkite was on the news. You could trust the news. That was your source, but they didn't grow up in this information fire hose time that you and I maybe are more familiar with because of our lines of work, or younger people because they grew up with these devices. So they don't really have the filters necessary to understand when they are just being programmed. And my detection for this is, Brannon, I'm a very curious guy. I'm not very confrontational. I'll ask people lots of questions. And I got just met with blank stares and then hostility when I would scratch at something, like somebody be holding a sign up that would say, Elon is stealing my rights. Great. Which rights? Well, we all know what rights he's stealing, they would say. I'd say, well, I don't. So which ones? And they couldn't have the conversation because they couldn't name one, right? It was just something they'd heard, I guess, and now it's on a sign. And that got programmed in, obviously. They didn't have context for it. They couldn't defend it. And so the first line of defense I found, instead of saying, I should look into that, maybe I should know why I'm holding this sign up. The first line of defense was to get hostile and angry, which is a sign that somebody's not holding an opinion. An opinion is guarded by facts. Here's my facts. A belief system is guarded by emotions. So they had a belief that Elon was stealing rights. Don't know where it came from. And so they got very emotional when challenged around that. So I saw a lot of aging, unhappy people, very low context, didn't have a lot of backing for what they said, super poor argumentation, debating, communication skills. And I worry, Brennan, that we're going to have an economic crisis at some point. To me, that's just going to happen. These people are poorly prepared for that moment because they don't have the context. They don't have any emotional resilience. They don't know why. It's just going to be a complete out of the blue shock. And they're going to just blame somebody rather than take a good hard look in the mirror and say, how did I miss this coming? How is this on me? I don't think they're going to do that.
And does that mean we're going to have a lot of, not that those folks would be out rioting, I don't think, but is this going to create a lot of bad pictures for for the media to say we've got, elderly people that are starving, they don't have food, they don't have medicine, they weren't prepared, and now we've got a national crisis on our hands. Maybe the power grid in part goes down, maybe it's a biological attack, a terrorist attack somewhere, services are disrupted. I don't know what it is. In massive inflation, hyperinflation, I have no idea. Maybe all the above at one time, right? Who knows? But this is going to create quite the scene for the television cameras, right? Old people dying because they don't have services. And of course, they're all going to be looking for someone to blame instead of accepting responsibility.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And of course, we've had a lot of whatever ism you want to call it, collectivism, socialism, communism. Listen, those isms are all fueled by the twin emotions of envy and resentment, and so that's what they're sort of keying on. They're very mad about things. I would say it's fair to say that the No Kings placards, and there were a lot of them, Brennan, they kind of summed up to, we're against 42 flavors of ice cream, right? They just were against all these things. And the real showstopper of the question was, cool, what are you for, right? And because that's where you build the commonality, the overlap, right? I would hope we would all be for safety, for leaving behind a better world for our kids and grandkids, for having a life of meaning and prosperity and all of that. That should be the starting point for the conversation. But here's the thing. All those isms, socialism, communism, totalitarianism, those people are professional terror downers. I don't think there were a lot of entrepreneurs in this crowd. I don't think there were a lot of self-made people. I think they were at best paycheck people, and in many cases, but some of them were clearly on the dole. So point is that to get through these times that we're coming up on, we're going to need those people who build, not tear down. So I'm kind of writing off this No Kings crowd as sort of, at best, those people are sort of just in the way. And at worst, Brennan, they're going to fight us because, it'll be very unfair that they don't have money or something like that, and they'll want it. So they have a lot of political power right now, I think, because both sides of the aisle in Washington don't want to disappoint anybody. Prediction: when our next economic crisis starts, the calls will be irresistible for D.C. to start printing and handing out stimmy checks and, the stimulus checks, all that.
Yep.
So when that happens, inflation comes roaring back.
Yep. Tell me about this. U.S. tankers dispatched, eastward. Civil war in Europe, inevitable? ? Tell me about that before we let you go.
Sure. So there's a whole bunch of tankers. So tankers are the air refueling vessels that, that they fly around, big, slow things. They're full of jet fuel. And they refuel helicopters and jets mid-sortie, as it were. So 24 of them left the United States. They went over. The story is, and this is probably true, that there's an exercise coming up in Finland called Atlantic Trident 25. That's where they're going. But a bunch of them went to places all around the Mediterranean, and some of them landed in Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. So the question is this the United States pre-staging some things that I'm sure Russia's not all that happy about these things coming over, but maybe they're going to be used in the Middle East. If needed, they are now more easily dispatched to the Middle East from, say, Germany than from Omaha. So they're over there. We already know the United States has been involved in this. We shot down some missiles the other night, according to us. We've been doing tracking. Obviously, we're helping a lot in this whole story. Iran has said, don't get involved. Listen, I don't see signs that this is dialing down yet. As our mutual friend Michael Yan would say, wars do two things. They grow, and then they grow larger. I think we're still at the larger stage on this. That's my personal assessment, and that's based on, if you saw last night, I don't know if you saw all the missiles coming into Tel Aviv and also Haifa.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. There were too many to count in one of the videos I saw. It was just, and by the way, they are frightening, these hypersonics that come in. So it's still growing. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of this at this point in time. And I think everybody should be prepared for much higher gasoline prices, oil prices, and some uncertainty about how all this happens in our economy. But if the Strait of Hormuz gets closed, I want everybody to just, whatever you need's topping off in your household, get it done, right? Extra food, extra fuel, cash out of the bank, the whole 9 yards, because if that gets closed down, we could get into rationing pretty quickly, even here.
Yeah, indeed we could. I don't know. Where do you want it to go? People go to your X or go to your website or both? Which one you want?
Oh, go to the website, and you can always find me on X, but the website, peakprosperity.com. And if you went to the homepage, you'd probably notice that we have a, see the tickets on sale? We have our, this is a lot of fun. This is our own yearly gathering, September 12th, 13th, 14th. We take over this whole camp right there on that lake, just that view you see right there. And man, it's a great time. This is where people come together, Brennan, talk face to face. It's kind of almost like a family gathering now. People have been coming for years, and it's just a lot of fun. So if anybody wants to come to that, we would love to have you. And it's time for us to begin having some serious conversations. We have one event. We have so many good events at this thing, but one of them is we leave all the cell phones out of all the smartwatches. We leave them out of the room, and we have the conversations that we all need to have.
That's great.
Important to do.
That's it, indeed. PeakProsperity.com, PeakProsperity.com. And, of course, you'll be one of the keynote speakers at our annual conference, October 3rd and 4th. Full details at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. As always, great to have your analysis, Chris. Look forward to having you back again. And, of course, having you in the Mid-South this fall.
Thank you. Looking forward to that as well.
Thank you. Chris Martenson checking in, folks. Check out his site, peakprosperity.com.